Hello. Today we'll talk about so-called suspended function pattern. Maybe it has another name, but some guys told me that it actually calls this way. What I'm talking about? Let's imagine you have to run a function, do some action with it, and during it you may or may not, it depends on input arguments, on input parameters, ask some user dialog, user questions, interface question in output operations, and so on and so forth. For example, if in input parameters there are not name or maybe surname or age and so on and so forth, you have to ask it during the functional evaluation itself. Sometimes it's a very useful situation. For example, on Android applications, you have to access the permissions and ask user to set the permissions if they are not granted yet. Yeah. And you have not to asking user for some reason if they are granted already, or maybe there are not so cases for asking them. Yep, so let's go to the code and see a little example. We have so-called show input dialog. It uses Java Swing modal open window for asking strings. Input dialogs for input and strings. And we have so easy and simple, straightforward function read synchronous. So this function will open modal dialog and wait until you type something. And if you have a function greet, synchronous way of function, if it called with a name and surname on input, it doesn't ask anything. It has enough information on its input parameters, name and surname. But if some of these parameters are absent in a map of input parameters of the function, it will ask it. Let me show you how it how it will look. Let's call greet synchronous function without any parameters. First of all, it asks us a name. Yes, let's type a name. Andrew. Yep. Press OK. Then it asks surname. Ivanov. Okay. Hello, Andrei Ivanov. It's me. Okay. Again, if we didn't type anything and pressed cancel, it actually asks us nothing and hello empty string. So that's how it looks like, and that's how it works. It waits until we type something and until we made input. But if we call it with all the needed parameters actually set, it doesn't ask us anything. Hello, Andrew Ivanov. But the second way, it's more interesting if this input have to be implemented asynchronously. Usually this asynchronous function have a callback function inside of input arguments, and these callback function actually have to be called with returned with typed string, for example. And it's a common way for cascading this so-called callback functions. Callback asks again and again, the next callback, and so on and so forth. So you have to create a long chain of callbacks. For example, if we have to ask user not only name and surname, but a lot of data, absent data, age, and so on and so forth. But let me show you some interesting pattern which can allow you to implement it more straightforward and easy. First of all, we have readAsync function, which actually the same read synchronous, show input dialog on prompt, but we will call the callback function on the result, and we wrap it into the future just to create another thread for asking. And then greet async, we have conditions. If we don't have nil, if we have nil name in input arguments, we will call read async and then immediately return from this function. The function will stop on this case. But we wrap into callback lambda the greet async itself function. So when we type something, it calls again, but with name already set. Then it will ask the surname and the same pattern, and finally, if it will have as name as surname as in input parameters, it will show us hello name surname. So the key is that we do not have to create a lot of different functions in order to construct a callback chain, a chain of different callbacks. We use the same, actually the same function greet async, but we can emulate it is a quasi-synchronous way. It will call several times for each our asynchronous call, and then each time it will call with different amount of input arguments, and we collect input arguments on each call. Let me show how it can be implemented. Try name and okay, so name, and after we type in name, the first call of greet async was made, and this is returning value. It's actually a future which created by greet async, this future. Now the name call creates from this line, and it's the second call of our greet async. Let's call the name. Okay, and only the third call of greet async shows us hello. Yeah, again, the same behavior if all the input parameters are enough for avoiding asking us asynchronous way anything. And the same behavior, but for user the same behavior, but only one interesting different point. First of all, while it shows us this input dialog, we can use this free REPL thread for doing some things. For example, +1, 2, 3 equals to 6, and blah blah blah. Though this user input waits us in separate thread and do not block current thread, because that's why it's asynchronous. And then we can continue. Yep. Hello, blah blah blah. So that's, as for me, maybe it's so simple, but it was interesting to to find out this pattern and use it in a lot of cases when we have to avoid so-called callback hell, when you have to construct the long and complex different callback chains, and even if they are depends on the conditions on the input parameters and so on and so forth. So doing this way, using only one function and depends its logic on input parameter values, equally does the job. So that's up for today's nail. See you later.